first of all, thank you everyone for joining us today. We've got some incredible speakers lined up for you. And please do engage. So you can go into all of the little different booths and engage directly with the brand. I wanted to take 10 to 15 minutes just to quickly frame up what composable commerce really is, okay? Give you guys a shape of things to come that you're going to see over the next couple of days, introduce you to a few terms, and really start to remove some of the mystification around what these words mean. So I'm just going to flick on a bit of a share here. Da-da-da. Here we go. Okay, so what is the whole concept of composable, right? Now, we are very used to seeing beautiful front-end technologies, great looking websites, great conversions, dynamic experiences. But I think all of us that work in tech are kind of used to these back ends that are a bit of a spaghetti mess, right? Where you pull on the gold string and suddenly all of the red strings start moving. One of the core concepts behind composable is that you're getting your solutions to do the very best thing that they are best at, okay? Now, we've evolved out from platforms where we used to, go and install WebSphere, CMS, CD-ROMs, and it was trying to have one solution that did everything. And there is a natural lean that is happening for segregation of those duties and people being the best at what they do in individual tasks. So what does that evolution look like? Okay, now we've all come from a heritage of a monolithic environment. And I'm going to talk a little bit about monolithic in a moment because it's not a dirty word, okay? What we've then moved to in the past sort of 2, 3, 4 years is this concept of headless. And instead of having extensions that kind of lived inside our source code, we started looking at having apps. And essentially what that means is that your data is moving between different services and different solutions, and you're starting to connect through APIs to talk to those pieces. And then what we've done is we've decoupled the front ends, right? So this is about saying, I don't want my customer experience to be tied to the back-end logic of what my platform allows me to do. And now what we're doing is we're moving into this concept of composable. Now, what you need in composable is this additional yellow layer of a composer, the thing that narrates the conversation, that brings together all of those different services. But those services are discrete in their nature, okay? So it's not necessary that your internal search tool necessarily knows exactly what's happening from an external marketing perspective. They don't need to know what those different tool sets are. They just need to know that there's an agnostic version of what's happening coming into the framework. And that's a little bit confusing. So let me talk through some of those pieces in more detail. Now, monolithic as a word, historically, this refers to big towers, monoliths, right? Historically, that comes from actually a mainframe environment where, we used to have everything on tapes and it was literally everything was dumped on one physical server. The concept of monolith has actually then started to transpose into services and technologies of, have I got one tool set that delivers all of my needs? And we're privileged at Overdose where we get to see a lot of RFPs. And unsurprisingly, a lot of those RFPs are actually asking for a monolith when you read between the lines. And they're looking for does your platform do X, Y, and Z? And it's looking for this silver bullet approach. And that's a learned behavior because we've all had such a nightmare historically with trying to integrate platforms. So one of the biggest evolutions in a composable view of the world is getting these platforms to talk nicely to each other through APIs, right? Now, this does not mean that you need to completely decouple everything. You will still have a natural tendency to say, this one platform, be it my Adobe Commerce, my commerce tools, a myriad of other platforms, your big commerces, your Shopify's, your Shopwares, your Salesforce Commerce Clouds, right? These are going to cure 7 out of 20 of my needs. And for 3 out of 10 of those needs, they are exceptionally good. And then there's another 3 out of 10 needs where they give an okay solution, which is my good enough for my MVP. But I want to accelerate those and go for a best-in-class solution. And that's where you start to cherry pick other tools and services around them. And essentially, the ecosystem of composable is about bringing together how do we talk nicely together and in an agnostic world. So monolithic is not a dirty word, right? It is something which exists in our ecosystem and will still be relevant for a lot of merchants going forward. And in fact, if you think about Monolith as a service environment, and when we think about some of the evolution of some incredible SaaS tools, like your BigCommerces and your Shopifys, some of them are quite monolithic in the way that they're presented because they're looking to service all of your needs under one tool set. And for many merchants, that makes complete sense as you go to market. What composability does is how can I start to slice and dice and pick away certain parts of that and grow my business through a best-in-class breed. So Headless in its simplest form is about changing where the front-end user engagement is disseminated away from the back-end e-commerce platform. Now, what that means is that we start using different technologies and we start building these very funky JavaScript-based front ends as opposed to what you might be used to in a more kind of templated, pure HTML, PHP, CSS world that's doing these live API calls. Instead of that, we've got a JavaScript environment. These tend to leverage a lot more front-end technologies, server-side caching, client-side caching, giving you really fast experiences, preloading and things like that. And that delivers what we call a PWA, a progressive web application. And all three of those words are important. It's progressive, right? Google basically invented this as a whole concept. It's a forward-thinking view about where does consumer engagement sit. So when John talked earlier about auditing your customer experience, this is about saying we want to be progressive in our customer relationships and not defined by the base platform we sit on. This is a web application, okay? Now, let's talk about application first. That kind of talks, if you think historically, around the concept of almost compiling your solution. And that's part of the trick of how these things run much faster in the browser environments, is they're kind of compiled, right? Whereas if you think about a traditional website, they're kind of rendering on the fly a lot of the time. And these are web applications. They're designed to run in browser. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't start to wrap these with apps. And that's kind of the next evolution, right? Of how do you get these PWAs that are running super fast in browser to also be running as an app icon on your phone. Now, in a Google Android environment, very simple. In an Apple environment, that's a progressive space and it's growing. There's some great stuff. And I think the guys at Deity are going to share some examples as well of where they've started to pioneer how do you wrap a PWA with an app environment, which means that you're running one base source code. The other way of thinking about PWA is progressing from, we went from responsive sites, which were adjusting how they displayed based on the size of the monitor or the screen you're looking at, to adaptive websites, which were changing some of the behaviors of how they would respond. Do I get my live chat? Can I do, those live video screen shares that John was showing you? And now into PWAs, where it's a full application based. So there's some of the features of the PWA, but it is fundamentally the future of where everyone's progressing, okay? It's an emerging technology, it's accessible and it's available, and we're crossing the chasm into there. Now, Headless is actually really complicated. To actually do it, you need to build out all these different stacks of having a separate CMS, a middleware that's talking to all your products, a content delivery network, a server-side rendering framework, and then your front-end display code. And so one of the most recent evolutions is this concept of front-end as a service, where they're crunching together all of those complexities of delivery, and they're delivering a SaaS service of building front ends that are agnostic to where your data's coming from, okay? So whether you're using Content Stack or Contentful, right? Whether you're using Adobe Commerce or Commerce Tools or a BigCommerce, whatever it may be for your back end, it is agnostic to where your data's coming from. And it means that in that space in the future, when you want to change parts of your stack, you can move them around like Lego bricks as opposed to having to knock down the entire building. Now, you're going to hear the word MACH used a lot, M-A-C-H. That is an acronym. It was an alliance started by the guys at Commerce Tools. And it's basically a set of practices for how a composable environment works and how platforms and service providers should play nicely together. 4 key terms in here. Microservices. This is about discrete services, things being the best at what they do. If you have a platform that is just doing loyalty, it is the hottest piece of product out there that does loyalty. It's not trying to do your PIM services and your marketing services. It's trying to do one thing and do it exceptionally well. It's API driven, okay? So these are talking to each other in an agnostic view. They are cloud native. Now, what that means in a SaaS world is that your hardware is now distributed up into the cloud. You don't run your own dedicated server environments. This is a shared resource which is dynamically scaling. And finally, headless that we talked to earlier, which is about where your experience, and we talk mostly about PWAs as an evolution of websites, but headless really talks about how can I leverage my content and my data in lots of different engagements. So is this on the fridge? Is it building an Alexa skill? Is it in-store kiosks? Is it actually piping up to my apps? Is it an iWatch app, right? So it's having the ability to leverage that data in multiple environments. So there is a undoubted view of where the market is converging to at the moment, okay? You've got your traditional monoliths in market, and you've got your composable platforms, where all they're doing is they're building products specifically for composability. There is a natural evolution that is happening here. And everyone that is a merchant in here, you're already doing composable to a point. You'll already have a separate marketing stack, a separate on-site search stack, right? What we're seeing is that the larger, what would be coined as a monolith, but they're really not, products like a Magento Adobe, a Salesforce Commerce Cloud, these guys are really aggressively re-engineering their architecture internally to have a decomposed monolith. What that means is they're breaking apart their own internal capabilities, be it their search, their product data, their PWA studios, their API layers around them. They're breaking them into this modular framework where you can start to pick and choose those pieces. So regardless of where you are as a platform that you're using today, this is an unavoidable space that we're moving into. And you're going to see that there'll be an evolution of monoliths getting more decomposed, and they'll start seeing that word DXP, digital experience platform, being used a lot more. And you'll see these composable platforms, which are getting some incredible VC funding coming into them, starting to acquire other tool sets and bringing them into that ecosystem and getting them to play nicely together. But the difference you'll see with the composable guys is they're probably not sticking it all under one banner and keeping that agnostic view about it. But equally, if you're dealing with an old school monolithic environment, you can still start to pick and choose those pieces. It's just that you get more pieces of the puzzle out of the box with that first license, so you can pick and choose those pieces. Now, Raven's chasing me that I've only got 2 minutes left. So I want to talk to you very quickly about orchestration, okay? This is about the conductor having multiple different parts of the orchestra. Now, each part of that orchestra, all they can actually see is their own sheet music. The only person in that environment that can see everything is the conductor, okay? Now, it's their job to sign in each of these different parts and take the line sheet music and build that into a concerto. And they then choose where that content is distributed. Now, in this scenario, we're talking to the audience in the background, but equally that could be out on a CD, on a podcast, on a radio channel as well. So when we think about those parts of the orchestra, we can also say that's different parts of a commerce stack as well, right? Now, what's really great about this is when you think about one part of that orchestra, and we're talking about the percussion in here, what the conductor actually sees and what the audience hears is the drum beat and the cymbal clash. What they don't know was whether that was on a Pearl, a Yamaha, or a Tama drum kit. What they know was, I got drum sounds, right? And that's the same thing with, I got loyalty, I got product, I got data, I got subscriptions, okay? So the conductor is normalizing it all back into this singular agnostic view that it can then present to the market. And if the drummer wants to change from a Yamaha to a Tama drum kit, if you want to change your marketing provider in a composable world, you can do that without having to change the entire orchestra. And that's the key capability of composable, is that you're using the best in class and you have the adaptability to grow your business with that. Now, very lastly, should you? Composable in its purest sense of the word is not a simple path. It requires a lot of thought leadership. So with that benefit of you're in charge, it's a pain because you have a responsibility to really build that, okay? You're going into this incredibly agile environment, but because you're bringing more components in, it's naturally complex as well. So you have to have an appetite for complexity, or it's a growing landscape where you can pick off more and more pieces as you evolve that through. You can iterate fast, but you need to be focused on how are those products talking to each other. And again, through the Mac Alliance, the standards of that and the pre-integrations are increasing. You've got discrete services, but you've got multiple failure points, okay? So your discrete microservices, the good thing about that is that if your subscription platform dies, it doesn't take down your whole website. And we've all had those websites where one part of the site fails and the whole thing crashes with big JavaScript errors. Now that we have them discrete and API talking, the rest of your business can continue to offer. One of the key points in here is actually distributed accountability, and it's something which very differs between a monolithic environment. We often use the phrase one throat to choke, right? Where you have this ability to go and talk to your big Adobe relationship and say, this component of your platform isn't working. And that's a very powerful, useful tool for merchants to have. When you move into a fully distributed composable environment, you have lots of people to talk to because the commerce platform can't be responsible for what the loyalty platform was doing. So you just need to be aware of that. And it requires quite a lot of license management in-house. And finally, you need to be pioneering in your mindset internally. And you need that governance from the board down, which says, go get it. Be the best you can possibly be. Don't look purely at just what's my total cost of ownership, what's my upgrade path, right? We just need to move into an environment where we are progressive and always growing. So that's me, guys. I've gone over by 2 minutes. We're at this point of crossing the chasm. Raven's going to introduce you now to the guys at Adobe Commerce. Have a fantastic event, and we look forward to hearing from you, answer your questions, get involved with the booths. And thank you. And sorry, Raven, for running over. You can kick me out now.
Thank you so much, Todd. And look,